This is Toledo Symphony Lab, a behind-the-scenes look at the world of classical music from WGTE Public Media and your Toledo Symphony. I'm Brad Cresswell. Joining me today are the Toledo Symphony's president and CEO Zach Vassar, principal second violin and artistic administrator Merwin Sue, and a special return guest. We have the TSO's Associate Concertmaster Téa Prokes with us today. Welcome back, Téa.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, the reason you're here is because you're actually playing on the concert. This is the last Masterworks concert of the season.
Just to be clear, Téa usually plays on the concert.
Well, yes. But you're performing as soloist, right?
I am, yeah. This is a pretty special concert for me.
Yeah, it's happening, there's one performance only, right? It's happening this Friday, June 7th at 8 o'clock at the Peristyle, Elaine Trudell at the podium. Téa is taking up her violin for the Beatles Fantasy. This sounds like a really interesting piece of music. It's paired with Michael Daugherty's Metropolis Symphony, which is all about Superman. And you're starting off with Aaron Copland, Fanfare for the Common Man. Let's hone in first, Téa, on you and the Beatles Fantasy. Can you guys tell us a little bit about this? Introduce it for us?
I can talk a little bit about it, yeah.
Hang on a second. Let me give you a little music here. There we go. That sounds like nice inspirational music, it's right?
Like Deep Thoughts by Jack Handey.
Exactly.
I feel like I should lower my voice.
By Téa Prokes.
Totally do that.
Talking really calmly.
Yeah, well, that's what public radio is all about.
Well, the Beatles Fantasy is kind of an interesting project. It's structured in a traditional form of a violin concerto where there are three movements, but every theme and kind of melody that the piece is based on is coming directly from a Beatles song. So each movement features 4 to 5 different Beatles tunes that you kind of know and love, and he expands on those themes and writes all sorts of neat variations and tricks for the violin and fun things for the orchestra, and it's a really cool piece.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it seems like that would fit naturally in the sort of the arc of the Beatles and who they were, because they had a long-standing interest in classical music, and somebody like Paul McCartney still does. So, yeah, that's a great pedigree, I think, to take hold. Tell us about the composer. Now, Zach, you were saying that TSO's performed music of this composer before, right?
Yeah, the composer is Maxime Goulet. He's a Canadian composer. I think Alain Trudel introduced us to his music at a Halloween concert.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's very colorful. At the Halloween performance, the music was telling a story. I want to say it was Headless Horseman, but I could be making that up. But I just remember the sounds of bones rattling, very obvious from the orchestra, but not in a kitschy way. And it was highly listenable. And I got really excited knowing that we would be doing the Beatles Fantasy later in the season.
Yeah. Now, we know that you're a big Mahler fan, Zach, right?
You can call me whatever you want.
So Mahler versus Beatles, where do you lie with both of those?
I don't think you have to choose. I think the better way to think of it is, just a couple weeks ago we did the Mahler 2, and now we're doing a violin concerto based on Beatles tunes. So there's great flexibility in this orchestra.
Well, and it also speaks to, you talk about the great flexibility, it speaks to the wide variety of programming that goes on throughout the year. Mm-hmm. This has been your 75th anniversary season, mm-hmm. and this is really, is this the finale concert for the season?
It is.
Yeah. How did you decide on this repertoire?
Well, we actually think of this almost like a 75th birthday present for our audience. This is the first time in a long time we've done a 10th week of Masterworks concerts. So this is kind of a bonus gift for those of us who've kind of stuck through the entire 75 years. Oh, wait, none of us. That's absolutely none of us.
About the closest you get is Bob Bell.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that it's a wonderful treat. And I think, in a way, even though obviously these are very much based on Beatles tunes, there's a lot of kind of historical precedent, really. I think, especially for the violin, we're so used to playing all of these operatic fantasies, and this is very much in that line. It's. I think when you're listening to the Beatles Fantasy, you think maybe less about traditional concertos and more about things like Sarasati's Carmen Fantasy.
Oh, yeah, right. And all those operatic fantasies
Exactly.
for violin and orchestra. Do you agree with that, Téa?
Definitely. It takes some of the most famous melodies and expands on them so much like something like Carmen Fantasy. It's just fun.
Yeah.
And it's perfect for a party concert.
Cool.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't the movements oriented to like early, middle, late Beatles?
They are, yeah. So the songs featured aren't necessarily chronological. However, the first movement definitely features songs from their earlier years, and then the second movement is more kind of their mid period, and then the final movement focuses on some of their later tunes.
Yeah.
So
I know that when we had you here before, which episode was that? Does anybody remember? You remember what you were on talking about?
I was talking a little bit in preparation for the Mozart series when we had
the Schnittke piece. Was it the Mozart à la Haydn, or was it a different?
It was
piece?
a different one. It was.
Oh well.
Name.
We'll cut
was
this
it
out
Lark?
later.
We could look it up.
It was
You
when
were
he
here before,
called
though.
in. He was like in the wilderness.
Oh, Blake.
Blake. Yeah. Blake.
Oh, right.
Right.
Musical geniuses.
Right. Musical geniuses.
How ironic.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we talked a lot
Genius
about...
is all about forward thinking.
Right.
Memory is an entirely different.
That episode was about Canadian geniuses, though. So we're going to make this one. I mean, we
She's
have a
from
Canadian...
Buffalo. She's basically a Canadian.
Yeah.
I'm really close.
Give us a little background on you, Téa, for folks who don't know. You're the Associate Concertmaster of Toledo Symphony. Give us a little, quick little bio, just if folks want to get to know you better.
Okay. Yeah.
Hang on a second. Here we go. Okay.
Well, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and I do have a very musical family. My father is a violinist in the Buffalo Philharmonic. My mom is a violist and also pianist, and spent her career and actually is still teaching in the Buffalo public schools, the music programs. And then I have an older sister who's also a full-time violinist. So
Wow. Now, when you were young, I mean, was it just a given? Like some families have, doctors and lawyers and what have you. Was it a given that you were going to follow in your parents' footsteps?
It wasn't a given. It wasn't something they forced on either of us at all. I think it was more the environment we were raised in. It just was something we all wanted to do together. It wasn't, you should go play the violin right now. I think I saw my sister doing it. I saw that there were violins literally lying around the house and wanted to play.
Wow.
But of course, they encouraged us when we were interested in it. But it was never forced.
Merwin, do you have violins lying around your house?
I do, actually. Right
You
now,
have two little boys at
I
home.
do have two little boys, and my almost 2-year-old really desperately wants to play the violin, and we are trying to find a right-sized thing that he will be allowed to just discard, which is what he does when he's done with something. He'll just throw it on the floor.
Well, just make it out of paper mache.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, we do have like this little $20 toy, but that's too big for him. And then there's a Christmas ornament one that's too small for him. So we're still waiting for the
You're
right
looking for that
discarded
Goldilocks
violin.
The
Exactly.
Goldilocks violin. Yeah. My kids both take violin. And, how do you get young people to practice the violin, Téa? What was your experience? Were you just one of these well-behaved children that's, they said, you go practice for 6 hours, and you're like, yes, Daddy, okay, no problem.
No, I think, practicing was hard, and in certain ways, practicing is still hard. It has to be something that you're interested in and that you find joy in, even if it, certainly is still work. But as a little kid, I think the environment was more, your sister's playing, why don't you play for a while? Or even just singing a lot. Honestly, a lot of it wasn't even on the violin. We would just sing through some of the songs and some of the melodies and listen to music a lot. But again, that was more fun. It was more like a game than work. And then I think it wasn't until I was quite a bit older that I really got more serious and started practicing with some real purpose.
Yeah.
So.
What was your path to Toledo then? Did you just come try out for the orchestra, or how did that work?
I did. I came to the area. I was living in Ann Arbor because of doing a couple master's degrees at U of M, University of Michigan.
A couple of master's degrees?
Yeah, I had a performance degree in violin, and then I had a really wonderful quartet that I played with throughout my master's, and I ended up getting a chamber music degree as well. So yeah, I came to the area for school, and I loved it. And it was really fortunate. A couple years after I graduated, Toledo Symphony had a position open for section violin, and I came to town, took the audition, and was lucky enough to win a position. And then I think about a year and a half later, a new position opened up for Associate Concertmaster, and that worked out as well. So
right. Did you have to audition then for that as well?
I did.
Yeah.
It was starting over, except I knew at the end of it, if it didn't work out, I would still have a job in the section. But it was...
It's kind of like being a senator running for president. You always have something to fall back on.
You do start from scratch. It's anonymous. They don't know who's playing, so it's a fair system, and still a very, very stressful day. You want to play your best, and
right.
So
well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm glad that worked out. And you and Merwin both have numerous opportunities to solo with the symphony on occasion, and including this Beatles Fantasy. I keep wanting to call it Beatles Concerto, but it's a fantasy, right? I mean, what's the difference between concerto and fantasy?
I think there's different formal expectations, which is kind of funny because this fantasy formally actually does use kind of the typical 3 movements of a concerto. But when you're doing a fantasy, I think you're allowed to, it doesn't need to feel like the first movement is fast, the second movement must be slow, the third movement must be fast. I think it frees you from those expectations. And I think as well, when he's using this term, I think it's deliberately meant to evoke those operatic fantasies, which there's a lot of a show-off virtuoso element to those fantasies by Paganini or by Sarasate or Vinyavsky, and I think that there's a lot of fiddling tricks. Maybe is that a good way of putting it?
That's a great way of putting it. I think the longer I live with the piece and work on the piece, the more I realize the fiddling influence. It's all over this fantasy. Just the bow strokes required are just less classical. They're more folk and they're more fiddling. And I think
Americana kind of.
It totally is. And I think when I first started practicing the piece, I was taking, even though I knew it was about the Beatles, I love the Beatles. I love that whole vibe of what that style of music feels like. And I think I was taking a really bizarrely classical approach, and it was totally failing. And I sort of just woke up at some point and just realized, oh my gosh, that's not what this is at all. What are you doing? And now it's much better.
You should listen to, there's a singer named Kathy Berberian who used to be married to Luciano Berio. They both passed now, I believe. But Kathy released a tune of Beatles covers that she did in classical mode. She was a singer. And so there's a great recording of her singing I've Got a Ticket to Ride, where she does it like in a Handel style, She's like,
gosh.
I've got the ticket to ride.
The rolled R alone would be fun. Yeah.
I can just imagine, what you're talking about there. Get up there and, throw in a few little Handelian flourishes. See how that works out. I want to talk briefly about the other music on the concert. Of course, everybody knows the fanfare for the common man, Aaron Copland, which I guess he wrote in the early 40s for a whole bunch of different composers submitted fanfares, and his was the one that I guess won the lottery. It's the one that is still programmed. What's the meaning of starting out the program with that particular piece?
Well, there's actually almost a birthday celebration aspect to that because of the fanfare, commissioning. It was a celebration as well, and but I think the idea that this is really a celebration for everybody. This is not just a celebration of, wow, let's just look at the amazing history of our orchestra, which we definitely have done throughout the year. But this is a party for everyone. And I think that's as much, as close as we can get to kind of making that point, which he does by kicking the strings off the stage, which is perfect.
Well, you make up for it later in the program.
Exactly.
We did Fanfare for the Common Man most recently at 4th of July.
Oh, yeah.
And am I right on that?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
Good.
That was one of those scary moments when it's like, we are pretty sure this is going to line up with the fireworks. Oh, yes, it does.
And it actually did. And I'm happy you mentioned that because, if you listen to the Copland, it sounds different from a Rossini overture. But when you think about what that would look like as a firework, it looked like Copland's Fanfare for the Common Man sounds, and that you had these great silver, strong fireworks going up that were silent, but you saw them. They didn't go bang. And then as the percussion comes in with the famous response to the brass call, these great noisy fireworks go bam, bam up in the sky. It was pretty
These were real fireworks.
Real
right?
fireworks, yeah.
You're not doing that at the peristyle.
No, I don't think the fire marshal would allow us to. But this is a really great way to celebrate, as Merwin said, an anniversary, and something that's kind of a communion of musicians and audience members. But it also does wave the flag for history, because Aaron Copland conducted the Toledo Symphony in his third symphony, I want to say.
Yeah.
I wasn't there.
Oh, well. We'll figure
Once
it out
again,
later.
memory and genius. Let's not try to put those together.
Fair. But it definitely was a tip of the hat to that.
Yeah.
And that, if you join Copland with Beatles, you kind of get this sort of larger than life concept going. And if you add the Daugherty, which we'll talk about in a minute, then you really get this sort of super, I would say superhero, but the sort of...
It is kind of a superhero fun kind of, gloss that you've got over this whole concert. You mentioned Daugherty, Michael Daugherty, who I think was last heard with the symphony in that organ concerto, right, with Paul Jacobs, based on the story of Citizen Kane. Michael Daugherty is somebody who draws on American icons for a lot of his music. In fact, that was the name of an early CD of his music, American Icons. And the piece you're doing is one of his early pieces that really put him on the map, his Metropolis Symphony, which is all about Superman, right? You want to tell us about that a little bit? I actually have a clip of Michael if you want to listen to it. The interesting thing about Michael Daugherty is, he has a home studio up in Ann Arbor, and you walk into the home studio and there's a couple of pianos, but he's got all these knickknacks and figurines and postcards and lunch boxes and all this stuff that deals with all these different kind of Americana subjects that he has immortalized, per se, in his music. I'll let him talk a little bit about that. And then he talks a little bit about Metropolis Concerto as well.
Right. Well, we are in my home studio in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where I create all my music. And for me, a space is very important, a creative space where I can have all my books and all my knickknacks and things I've collected and scores and, different things I like to collect. Like you'll see there's neon signs, and I've got a bunch of old oak cabinets here filled with old postcards and matchbooks. And then I have another giant oak cabinet back in the corner where I have all my photographs because I like to take photos. And
He's got a lot of
all
stuff.
the family
You can imagine.
photos over the years and other things. So I have a special drawer where I keep all my autographs I've collected over the years. My metal lunchbox collection you can see up there, where I have lunchboxes made in the 1950s and early 60s. They were all made in Ohio, metal lunchboxes that kids used to go to school. And my prize to the Star Trek and the Superman lunchbox, the originals from the Superman is from 1954, the Star Trek's from 1964. Those were both really sought-after collector's items. So anyway, it's the world according to Michael Daugherty. So I knew I'd kind of hit on something. It was something that I liked, I enjoyed it. It kind of released my imagination to just come up with crazy ideas, like Lois features 2 flexitones in orchestra. Also, I just kind of went for it. I was working in isolation. I was living in a little town in Ohio. What I was writing was sort of, off the radar, so to speak. It was played by Baltimore, and then also David Deltredige was the composer in residence for the New York Philharmonic, and he heard about it, so he programmed one of the movements for the New York Philharmonic. So that put me on the radar, and then one thing led to the next and so forth.
Composer Michael Daugherty talking about, giving us a little tour of his home studio, but then talking a little bit about the Metropolis Symphony, which Did I call it a concerto before? But okay. Well, everything today is a concerto, just so we'll just settle it at that, right? The Metropolis Symphony, I should say, which Toledo Symphony is bringing to the Peristyle on Friday night. Well, what do you think of that? How are those flexitones going? You all smiled when the flexitones came out.
Well, I think it's funny that we called it a concerto because it's got a really concerto-like violin part as well.
See, I meant to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a perfect segue. Kirk Toth, our concertmaster, has been working this violin part for pretty much as long, if not longer, than Téa's been working the Beatles Fantasy. It's a very, very tricky part. And it's got some wonderful flute duet as well that's really, really, really difficult. So it's not just the flexitones. We're pretty much all getting a workout there. But it's a wonderful, once again, I think it's a great tribute to how symphonic music can bring together different eras because Michael really, puts these almost these winking tributes to all of these different past eras of music. I think the most obvious being the Dies Irae and the Red Cape Tango.
Right. Yeah, he uses that. And he also had talked at another point in this interview I did with him about how it was not a popular thing. Like it was really risky for him to use the Dies Irae because so many other composers had used it for weightier subjects, and here he is using it for Superman, right, for the Red Cape Tango. And I guess it was controversial at the time, but he decided, like he often has throughout his career, just to go with it.
I think I chuckled at the mention of flexitones because Daugherty is an imaginative and colorful composer. And the fact that he would have Lois represented by a couple flexitones makes me smile because, the flexitone is probably best known for a strange appearance in a Cacciatore piano concerto, and now the Superman Symphony or the Metropolis Symphony by Daugherty. So it's a whimsical sound, and it just I think it speaks to this sense of lightness and maybe a smirk or a grin that goes with that whole work.
Yeah, that's great. And it fits the mood of this entire concert, I imagine. Well, I want to leave Metropolis alone for a minute and get back to the Beatles, because I do have a little Beatles quiz, which I've designed it in such a way that you don't have to be like a Beatles aficionado to get all these answers, right?
Do you have to be able to spell it?
No, you don't have to be able to spell.
Are you going to show us colors of albums and we have to be able to identify?
I'll get the white one.
White album.
No. It's just a little Beatles quiz. Now, Téa, are you really a Beatles fan? Or you've heard of the Beatles, right? Because you're kind of the younger generation.
I have certainly heard of the Beatles. I feel like the timing of your question is making me nervous because you're asking if I'm a Beatles fan, and I would say yes, but that does not mean that I will get the answers correct in this quiz.
Oh, that's okay.
It's okay. All you have to work on is mastering a concerto. That's
right.
a lot. So we'll give you a pass.
Well, it is only a fantasy.
It's only a fantasy.
It's the fantasy. See?
Take away what I just said.
Now I've got
Exactly,
him saying
right?
concerto. Perfect.
But I still remember that it was one of the first, if not the first concert that you played with us as Associate Concertmaster.
It was the very first that we did. It was a Pops at the Stranahan. And we had a group of guys.
Hang on a second. Okay, go ahead.
The very first concert that I sat in my new titled chair of Associate Concertmaster was a Beatles program, and Merwin remembers I was so excited because I love that music, and I just thought, this is a really nervous day of work. I'm really anxious. I want to do a good job, but of all the pieces, at least it's the Beatles because that's so fun, and I know them so well. So. It was a great day.
I had to elbow her a couple of times. Wait, you're singing. You're not. You're not playing.
I did forget to play a couple times because I can't help but sing. It's so catchy and it's so fun. And
can we look forward to that this Friday?
Yeah.
I will try my best not to sing.
But if you do, it's okay. All right, let's switch gears here. Little Beatles type music to get us in the mood for the quiz. Okay.
This is more Johnny Cash than the Beatles. I'm sorry.
It's kind of a combo, right? Yeah. Okay, first question. Michelle, you know that song, Michelle? Mm-hmm. Was inspired by McCartney's technique for getting girls at parties. What was his technique for getting girls? Was it pretending to be a foreign exchange student? Or was it telling women that his girlfriend named Michelle had just died?
Oh, gosh.
to score sympathy, or was it singing in fake French at parties? Which of those, A, B, or C?
I would go with C.
I'm definitely going with C.
Yeah. He would pull out his guitar and sing and make up songs in French, fake French, to attract girls. Okay, Ringo Starr's real name is A, Richard Starkness, B, Richard Starkle, or C, Richard Starkey.
I'll go with B.
Not Richard Starkle.
What were the other two, Brad? I'm sorry.
Starkness is A and Starkey is C.
I go with C.
All right. True or
Darkness
false?
sounds like Game of Thrones.
Who
Yeah.
I was thinking.
It's what happens
Oh,
when you
don't
get closer
start.
and
Don't
closer
start.
to nighttime.
No spoilers.
Darkness takes over.
Okay. True or false? Strawberry Fields was a real place. Was it a real place or
Forever. Yeah.
not? That's a yes, I
Yeah,
take it.
yeah.
Yeah, it was a real place. Strawberry Fields was a place near Liverpool where John Lennon grew up. It was one of his favorite places to explore when he was a kid. So, that sort of nostalgia feels, Strawberry Fields forever. And, of course, later it became a landmark in Central Park.
I'm pretty
in New
sure
York.
Mahler had a composing hut there.
Exactly. McCartney often came up with melodies before he added the words, and sometimes he would use made-up words to keep the melody in his head, right? So for the song Yesterday, what was his made-up phrase to keep that melody in his head? Was it scrambled eggs, liverwurst, or apple pie? A, B, or C?
Oh, it was food. I want to say it's A.
Wow, Zach, you were
Wow.
cleaning
You were-
up. Scrambled eggs.
You were nailing it.
Baby, how I love my scrambled eggs. Something like that.
I'm
yeah.
thinking liverwurst.
That's just
That doesn't sound good.
I happen to like liverwurst, so that
You're an
one,
audience
that one
of
sounded
one.
good to me. I like all three of those foods, but I would not eat them together. Maybe any two of them together. No, apple pie. Yeah, we'll save that for
Yeah,
later.
the liverwurst and apple pie is what got me.
Yeah. The Beatles went through several name changes. Which of these was not one of their names? Johnny and the Moondogs, the Rainbows, the British Everly Brothers, all of the above, or none of the above? Really hard, huh?
I'm going to go none of the above.
Wow. So, meaning those were all names of the Beatles. Johnny and the Moondogs, the Rainbows, and the British Everly Brothers, which is really weird and random. What was their original name when they started in 1957? Does anybody know that? That's extra credit point. The something men. The Quarrymen.
Quarry.
Yeah. That's one for me. All right. Right before they became simply the Beatles, which evidently at one point was spelled Beetles, but then John Lennon wanted to identify with the Beat generation, right? They were also known in a colorized version. They were known as either the Silver Beatles, the Gold Beatles, or the Black Beatles. Which of those three?
This is a great quiz.
No idea.
That's a wrong answer.
Should I start singing?
Just guess. Yeah, do it.
You get half point for that.
I'll just tell you, it's the Silver Beatles.
Silver.
Okay. Here's one for you, Zach. Frank Sinatra described this Beatles song as the greatest love song of the past 50 years. He also made a cover of it. Is it Something, When I'm 64, or It's Only Love?
Something.
That's right. I knew you would get that.
It's a good cover.
Yeah. Now, at the end of Strawberry Fields Forever, John Lennon appears to mumble something that sounds like I buried Paul, which fueled that whole Paul is dead rumor. So what is he actually saying? Is it cranberry sauce, bloody well lost, or I am the walrus? Which of those is Paul actually saying at the end of Strawberry Fields Forever?
I'm going to guess C.
I am the walrus?
Yeah.
No.
I'm gonna go B.
No.
I'll go D.
Up to you, Merwin. Can you
A.
get it? Yay! Cranberry sauce. For extra credit, what else did Lennon say right after that? Was it Calm Down, Ringo? Was it I Buried Paul? Or was it Go Home, George?
It's
Go
got to
Home,
be Go
George.
Home, George.
Oh,
He didn't even get a single mention in this quiz.
yet.
He just did. He got a mention.
And it was wrong?
Yeah.
Poor George Harrison.
No,
like the
it's
ampersand
Calm
of it.
Down, Ringo. Because the end of it, in this particular version, ends with a extended, crazy drum solo, right?
Okay.
And so it's like, Calm Down, Ringo. Ringo.
Ringo.
Yeah.
That's
and
what you call
brings
them
it
when
to
you're
an
good
end.
friends.
I
Stop
gotta
it,
say,
Starkey.
I think that Zach was
Zach.
Zach definitely won.
Yeah, totally.
the winner. Again, the concert is this Friday, June 7th, 8 o'clock p.m. at the Paris Style. The Beatles Concerto with violinist Téa Prokes, Elaine Trudell at the podium. Also, Aaron Copland's Fanfare for the Common Man and Michael Daugherty's Metropolis Symphony. More information at ToledoSymphony.com. Also, 419-246-8000. This program is a production of WGTE Public Media in collaboration with our sponsor, the Toledo Symphony. You can download episodes of our program as a podcast by going to our website at wgte.org/lab. You can also subscribe to us through your podcast app of choice, including Apple and Google Podcasts. My thanks to Zach Vassar, Merwin Sue, and Téa Prokes. I'm Brad Cresswell. You've been listening to Toledo Symphony Lab from FM 91.